Hello and welcome to Wellness Shots with Jewel. Today we have Dr. Esser coming and talk to us about the current situation. Welcome, Dr. Esser.
My pleasure to join you, Jewel.
So first of all, thank you for coming and joining us for this 20-minute laser focus Wellness Shot with Jewel. I'd like to talk to you about the coronavirus. That's been on everyone's life right now. So anything you want to share with our viewers?
Well, I think the first thing that I'd love to share is that there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of hysteria out there. And I think it's absolutely essential that if your viewers know that they themselves tend toward anxiety, that they stop looking at all the mass media and they try to focus in on one or two positive sources that have good science behind them and then go from there. And the reality of what we're seeing in the data is the following. The sicker you are to begin with, the more compromised your health is to begin with, the more severe or serious this upper respiratory illness is. The healthier you are, the more vital you are, the lower your risk of anything bad related to coronavirus happening to you.
So what are the challenges now and how can we boost our immune system during this crisis?
Well, I think the greatest challenges are twofold. One is that people have really built up this level of anxiety and fear in their hearts, even of their fellow humans being around them, that we've got to start breaking down some of those false fixed beliefs. This idea that, oh, every other person is just infected and waiting to infect me is not based in science. Number two, because let's face the reality, right? We see viruses and bacteria on people all day, every day as we walk around. Yet that's been for millennia. And that has not prompted us to shut ourselves down in isolation and be constantly fearful. Number two is there are a lot of people who have been staying in their homes watching Netflix and eating garbage. I had a patient today watching, I put on the coronavirus 15. And I was like, oh no, right? Because that's not the answer. But if you're fearful and anxious, you're gonna go for the comfort foods. And those comfort foods are the very foods that compromise your health. Because remember the data out of Italy and China and now New York. What does it show? It shows that if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, some kidney dysfunction, you're way, way higher to end up with a severe case of coronavirus in the ICU and potentially on a ventilator and die. Versus 90% of people, nothing happens to them. They get exposed, they get a little illness, a little upper respiratory, and they get all better. That's what we want for ourselves. So every bite that you take, every day, whether you do or don't exercise, can influence whether you have the blood pressure, the diabetes, the obesity, et cetera. Why? Because these are all signs of chronic inflammation. So right now, today is the day, right? Fill up your fridge, all the fruits and the veggies, right? And then pull them out and eat them and get your exercise every day.
And what kind of exercise?
So I want everybody, right, as a sports physician, I want everybody to get a couple types. I want them to get some cardiovascular exercise. I want them to get a little resistance strength training and a little balance and flexibility work. But with the cardiovascular piece, that's crucial. Why? Because we want the lungs to be opened and inflated and filled and get that movement of the rib walls, et cetera. Because when you decrease your respiration, so you're doing small little breaths, what happens is we don't oxygenate the tissue as well. And the very bottom part of the lung doesn't fill up and expand as much. And that creates a perfect environment for bacteria to set up, shop, as well as for a little extra lymphatics to kind of just pool in that area, a little bit of extra fluid. And this sets your body up for the viral infection to take hold even more and to compromise your lungs. So we want the big breath, right? And we want that heart rate up a little bit so it's getting blood flow all through your body and releasing a lot of endorphins.
So what would be the best cardiovascular exercise that people can do at home? Because not everyone is going outside right now.
Right. So number one is if you live in an environment where the outdoors are clean, it's not a lot of polluted, stuff. If you live next to a factory, right, et cetera. But if otherwise, I want you outdoors. I need you outdoors. So the worst place you can be, if you look at the studies, is actually indoors. Even looking at the science, coronavirus has less transmissibility in heat and high humidity. That's what all the studies have shown. And so you want to be out where it's hot and you're sweating and you're breathing deeply. It's not that You know, I saw people the other day at the beach, since I'm in Florida, and they're walking with a mask on the beach, and I'm going, what? You're not understanding the science at all. This warmth, this heat, you want to breathe in all this fresh air. So being indoors with recycled air-conditioned air is not good for your body at all. But if you have to stay indoors, let's say you live in an apartment in a high rise, you don't have access to a nice place to walk, etc. Well, then anything's simple. It can just be walking in place like I am right now, right? And jogging in place if you can do it, right? A little ski hop, side to side, leg to leg, back and forth, and even up and down with your arms while you're walking in place. That gets your heart rate up. So put your favorite music on and get jamming a little bit, walking in place, arms going up and down, looking like you're crazy, but you're having a great time. And that's what you want until you're out of breath and you're sweating a little bit, etc. That's what you should be doing. Why? Because it's going to give you endorphins from the joy of the music, plus endorphins from the exercise, plus increase your respiratory rate, get oxygen in there. You can do this. Simple stuff pays big dividends. Now, if you have access to a stationary bike or, you know, an elliptical or things like that, great. You know, if you have access to a great pool, you can start swimming and do that as well. Anything that gets the heart rate up and gets you breathing.
Wonderful. You also mentioned strength resistance exercise. What would that be?
So this could be simple things, right? Like just simple squats where you're up against the wall or squatting down onto a back of a chair and back up and back down and back up, right? Or if you've got some water bottles, you know, some 1 gallon water bottles in your house, you can start doing some curls with them. These sorts of exercises. And this is so crucial because simple, small things pay dividends. You can do some push-ups on the countertop. You don't even have to go all the way down to the ground, right? But why do I want you to do that? Because resistance training keeps your body strong. And my friends, coronavirus is going to pass just like all these viral illnesses do. And you're going to either be left with better health or you're going to be with worsened health. And guess what? All the diseases that are going to kill you will be waiting for you. The high blood pressure, the heart disease, the diabetes. So, I mean, I was looking at the numbers, for example, just the numbers the other day out of the CDC. So if we say that, you know, 40 to 70,000 people, you know, have died, let's say, of coronavirus in America in the last couple of months, well, 800,000 people have died of heart disease and diabetes, right? And all of these other common diseases. So when you're at home trying to be, you know, or being fearful of coronavirus, are you improving your health or compromising it? Because 99% of people are not going to die of coronavirus. They're going to die of heart disease, which is the #1 cause of death, right? Every 37 seconds, someone has a heart attack in America. So we need to make sure we're really thinking about what's most likely to kill us and make sure what you're doing is setting you up so that you don't die of those things and you don't get sick of those things. Yeah.
And you also mentioned balancing. And I also read something and learned something that it's very good for your bones.
Yes.
The balancing exercise.
Well, and balance is so crucial for us, right? So strength training, the resistance exercise helps build bone, right? Because a woman maxes her bone mineral density in her 30s, and then it comes down by 1% each year after. So we want that resistance training to keep the bones strong and healthy. But balance keeps you from falling. And if you fall, that's when you break a hip. That's when you end up with the injury. So we want to work on balance every day. It can be silly. You can stand on one foot and brush your teeth, right? You know, you can come up with a million different ways. Take a little beach ball, throw it against the wall and catch it standing on one leg. These sorts of things. You can do a little line dancing off a video off YouTube. You know, you can do any of these things that work on balance, change in direction, things of that kind, because many of us stop doing that as we age. And we need to keep doing that to reduce our risk of falling and to improve our quality of life and function. So you can play with the grandkids, right? Years down the road.
Okay, great. So we talked about boosting our immune system with the sport activities. How else can we boost our system?
So we know that other things that are crucial for the immune system, we talked about sleep, right? Being absolutely essential, 6 to 12 hours per night, ideally, and that you wake rested. You wake rested so you're ready for the next day, because during sleep, you reduce generalized inflammation in the body, you upregulate immune function, and all manner of hormones are released throughout the body to help you have a vital day the next day. Next, we want to also be getting plenty of water. Just fresh, clean, purified water, because water helps your lymphatics to flow, your capillary beds to flow. So it's really moving through your bloodstream, all of your white blood cells very efficiently. So you want the highway wide open so that all of your white blood cells can travel where they need to, and the antibodies to help keep you healthy. Next, we want to really make sure you're getting some good vitamin D. We know vitamin D is powerful for the immune system, and my favorite place for you to get it is going to be outdoors. So getting some sunlight on your back, your shoulders, your arms and legs for about 15 to 20 minutes every day when the sun is above 45 degrees of the horizon. So you're able to really get some exposure. And if that would be the most ideal place to get it. So every day, a little bit of it.
Well, I want to ask you about the vitamin D, the sun. So are you saying if I go out in the morning to walk my dog, and even though it's sunny, like around 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., it's still not enough?
It may not be. And, a simple place to start for those who are unsure is to get a good vitamin D, a blood sample test, right? And kind of see where yours is. And we'd like to see it up in the, above that 35, 40 range. There are a lot of arguments about what's exact the number, but we want it up there, right? Mm-hmm. And so, people of darker skin complexion, right? They have to get more sun in order to get more vitamin D from it. If you're wearing lots of lotions or coverings over your skin, or you're always in long sleeves, you're not getting the sun exposure we want either. But I'm not saying, put on the coconut oil and lay in the sun for 4 hours. That's not it. We're saying getting out there 15, 20 minutes to get some good, healthy vitamin D production.
Okay, so sports, sleep, 6 to 10 hours, water. How much water?
So if you're eating a purely plant-based, whole food, minimally processed diet, you want to remember the majority of those plants are nothing but water. Like pineapple is 87% water, and cucumbers and celery are like 90+% nothing but water. So if you're really just eating all of your calories from minimally processed whole raw fruits and vegetables, you're probably getting plenty of water. If, however, you're not, then you should be shooting for that 60, 64 ounces a day of purified, fresh, clean water. And I think it's great to start the day off, right? A big glass of fresh water and get the body, everything moving, et cetera, and rehydrated. And then, throughout the day to be drinking some water. Now, if you're in a more tropical environment and you're running around in the outdoors, you're working outdoors, probably need a little more water than the next person over. Or if you work in a very dry environment, you tend to dry out a little bit more as well. So, shoot for that 60 ounces, see how it feels, modify accordingly.
Do you know anything about like superfoods? Should we use some extra superfoods in our diet to be extra healthy?
Yeah, I think this is a great time to play around and experiment with some of those, quote, superfoods. I consider a plant-based diet, every one of the foods is a superfood, but some have gotten a little more marketing and press than the others. But I do think this is a great time to maximize your berry consumption, all those wonderful fresh berries that are in season. I think it's good to add a few more mushrooms to the table. They obviously have some nice immune modulating effects. So I recently had more shiitakes, and then I was having some criminies, and then I was having some of the oysters, and it was fun just mixing them up and trying them in different ways. I think it's also good to add some more of the allium, right? The garlic, the onions, et cetera. So I've been making a few more fresh black bean salads with, chopped onions and this, so I think, yes, add more of those foods in because they help complement your immune system. Also, things we don't think about as much, like lentils are actually an immune superfood because they help your gut flora so much. They're a great source of bioavailable proteins and iron, manganese, just all these great things. And so those are wonderful places to, fill your plate with all of them and celebrate your health right there.
Awesome. Any other vitamins besides D that we should take right now?
I would not recommend this as a universal approach. But let's say you began to have upper respiratory type symptoms. You are a little immune iffy, right? You're carrying extra weight. You got some blood pressure meds on board, some of these other things. If it was me, I'd probably grab some vitamin C crystals, right? Like a powder, and put, 4,500 milligrams into some water a couple times in the day. Why? Because I think the risks are very low, and there is data to support the use of vitamin C as an antiviral treatment in very high doses for people when they're in a symptomatic state. There are actually quite a few studies, if you look at the literature, even on people being in the ICU, given vitamin C orally or intravenously every couple hours, and showing that they decrease their time in the ICU by up to 20%. So these studies have been done and they're quite compelling when you actually look at the data itself. So, I mean, a little bit ago, for example, I felt some weird upper respiratory thing coming on and it was right in the midst of all this. And so I grabbed some of the vitamin C and just boom, boom, boom. Because why? Because I couldn't fast in that time. I couldn't go home and just sleep and rest. I had to keep seeing patients, caring for people, et cetera. And so I want to make sure my immune system was, pristine. And I did that for a day and whatever it was just passed, Again, would it have passed on its own or did the vitamin C do it? Hard to say, but I think I use something I call a risk-benefit scale that I call a sliding scale. The more risky or the more costly something is, the more data I need. The less risky and the less costly, the less data I need to possibly apply it in my life. So again, some vitamin C I think is very low risk. A little bit of zinc, at 40 milligrams a day, short term for like 3 to 4 weeks, probably low risk as well. Long-term zinc exposure at that dose may make you copper deficient, so you don't want to keep that going for too long. And the selenium, right, using a little selenium I think is low risk as well. The question becomes, does it really have a significant therapeutic outcome for patients? That I think is up in the air. But if it makes you feel more comfortable taking a few of these simple supplements, I think the risk benefit is probably in the positive end.
Anything you want to say about multivitamins?
Yeah, I'd say that the majority of multivitamins are probably not necessary, not required, and may have unnecessary fillers in them as well. So a lot of multivitamins use synthetically derived sources or forms. A great example is vitamin E. So vitamin E comes in 4 different natural enantiomers. They're different shapes of it, if you will. So the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, tocopherols. But most multivitamins, yeah, I know you're looking at yours right now, those of you at home, pulling out your multivitamin. Most of them have just alpha tocopherol, which is a chemically synthesized form of vitamin E. And in studies, if you take just that form, you actually increase inflammation in your body. That's problematic, right? But the cheapest and easiest form of vitamin E to form is alpha tocopherol. And when you go to the store, 80% of all of the vitamins have just that. And so, the same with vitamin A, and then also studies with folic acid showing that possible increase in mortality. So for me, the risk-benefit relationship for a multivitamin isn't there. I'm not convinced that it has any significant long-term health benefits for people. And so I think the first place to start is a foundational diet. Excellent micronutrient dense program. And then if you want to add a multivitamin in, at least try to get one with very few, maybe it's whole food derived, it has very few, fillers, has none of these chemically derived forms of vitamin E, vitamin A, so on and so forth.
So now that what do you think after this pandemic, what are we going to see?
I really am not sure. I mean, here's what I know is going to happen, right? As far as the pandemic is going to pass. And what you've seen is that in every country in which this has reared its ugly head, you've seen several weeks of spiking and then several weeks of decline, and it's pretty much, we're done. Now, the mistake I think that some countries are made, and perhaps even the US, is the more aggressively that we isolate people from each other, we lack the ability to actually get exposure to the virus. And as a result, we get inadequate antibody production and inadequate long-term protection. And so I have concerns. My concern will be that we are dragging on this process much longer. One of my good friends, who's a very astute statistician and the director of a big preventive medicine research institute at Yale for decades, he actually volunteered in New York City for several days working with patients. And it was interesting, his evaluation. I mean, he said, yeah, what you're seeing is that the young, healthy people, like all the workers in the hospitals, et cetera, on average, if they got it, they get better, they quarantine for 2 weeks, come home and start seeing patients again. They come back to the hospital, seeing patients. And then you've got the people from the nursing homes who are extraordinarily unwell and sick and debilitated, who are being brought in just like they would with a standard flu season. And I think, it'll be interesting to see as this plays out. But whether even our mortality is worsened at the end of this year, or whether really what we've done is compressed mortality of people who would have died the next 6 months, like many nursing home patients, which is very unfortunate, but they've died earlier. Because remember, in America, 8,000 people die every day on average of just random things. And so this is life. And so, when we have a flu epidemic every year, right, every time it comes, tens of thousands of people die in the US and around the world. And so, in America, we just have such an unwell population right now. So This is why it's so important that we focus on our health today so that the next upper respiratory illness that comes around, we're ready for it. And we're not really worried, because I don't think the majority of people who are healthy need to worry about this virus. And that's what the literature would support. In Italy and China, right, 90% of people, there was no risk. There was nothing that happened. It was a benign event.
Thank you. So the last advice to our viewers to get through this pandemic
is love yourself with food that loves you back. Get your exercise every day. Make sure that you're filling your mind and your heart and your soul with positive thoughts and positive emotions, and avoid all the naysayers, the negativity, because there are people out there that are wanting to blow this up into such proportion that it just paralyzes you because of fear and anxiety. But the data doesn't support that, my friends. The data says that you're going to be okay. The majority of us will all be fine. And what we need to focus on is getting ourselves as healthy as we can be, and helping our friends and family members to also get as healthy as they can be. So we lift everybody up to a healthier place, and then we can move on to a more vital life, because this is going to pass, and all the diseases that have been waiting to nip at your heel and get you will be waiting for you. Are you going to be ready? Keep watching Jules' show, and you're going to be ready.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this great Wellness Chat with Jules.
My pleasure.